Skeptical, Parenting Through Nonbelief.
We're a married atheist couple raising two wonderful, strange children. We ask big questions, dissect weird parenting moments, and examine how society ignores or misrepresents families like ours. If you're any stripe of non-believer who's involved in raising children, welcome. You are our people.
Our kids have heard all our swears, but yours might not have. So be thoughtful if there are young people listening with you.
So, to quote Clarence Boddicker in RoboCop, guns, guns, guns! Our kids love Nerf guns, and our eldest is obsessed with airsoft now. I am not averse to guns. We have talked about how, depending on where you live and what you do, a gun is an exceptionally valuable, if not invaluable, irreplaceable tool. We have talked about how their use and care with their Nerf guns and whatever will indicate to me when they are ready to go try their hand at a firing range using real guns, the live ammunition. They are nowhere close to me trusting them to do that yet. They're better than some kids that I've seen, like by a lot. They don't just randomly walk up and start aiming a gun at an adult's face like some of their friends might.
We're back to talking about Nerf guns.
Yes, Nerf guns, not real guns, obviously. They have never touched a real gun. But I don't know, like, as much as I am okay with guns, and as much as I think firing guns is fun, target shooting is fun. You know, the little bit that I did of, CQC and room clearance training back in Los Angeles, that was fun. So, and like, I'm not averse to hunting. I like eating game meat. I like the idea of a critter that would otherwise just die of natural causes anyway, out from disease or, a predator or whatever, would get hunted by a human and then processed to the point of absurdity such that you would get hundreds of pounds of meat potentially that would help a family eat over many months. All of that is great. I guess not if you're a vegetarian or vegan, but my concern from a skeptical viewpoint is I need to make sure that I don't let my enthusiasm for getting my boys to a firing range because I think real guns are fun and cool. I want to make sure that my skepticism remains on point because their behavior is really the only data that I need to collect. I can't believe ahead of time that they'll ever be ready. And so I don't know, do you think it's a sort of situation where I would bring them to a firing range and let their natural deference to authorities and trainings that I've seen in their various, sports training situations, because they both respond really positively to coaching, that they would get their training and certification from a licensed professional? Like, do you think that maybe I'm being overly cautious and that I should just take them somewhere where they would listen to somebody other than me, who knows more about it than me, who's a much better shot than I am, to help sort of drive home all the stuff that I nonetheless have been talking about with them for years? Like, I don't know. I've been thinking about this increasingly because, they both are at that age where they are still immature, but yearn to be treated as being mature. But this, their obsession with collection of guns and their cavalier attitude, regardless of how much I remind them that this is sort of a test for them and their gun handling, that their cavalier attitude sort of undermines any hope they have currently with me of just taking them somewhere and doing target shooting. I don't know. It's been on my mind.
So I don't think guns are fun or cool.
Okay.
We've talked about Witness in the past, which is a movie about a cop who ends up going and hiding with the Amish. And there's a scene where he's given the Amish family he's staying with his gun to hang on to. And the boy in the family has found it. And his grandfather takes him aside to talk to him about why they don't like guns. And at the end of that talk, he tells him, do not touch the ugly thing. And that is, my kids play with guns all the time. And that is truly how I feel about guns. So when I talk about them having uses, that is hunting, which I don't have a problem with. And that is like farm life, where particularly in more rural areas, you might have predators that you have to worry about with your flock and those kind of things. But I don't think there's any use where somebody needs a gun for other people. So, I'm on record that I have told the boys 2 things that I know I can't stop them doing as adults, but that I have asked them to do as adults, and I will keep asking them to do as adults. And that is never own a gun and never own a motorcycle, because I think they are both too big of risks. So would I mind if they want to go and do target shooting every now and then and rent a gun? I don't know. I don't think it's something we should push for. Is there an argument that knowing gun safety is a good thing? I guess. But if they stay in urban areas, they truly never need to handle a gun. And if they're happy with stopping with airsoft, fine by me. I think all you need to know about guns is don't fucking touch them. That's...
Wow, we got an F-bomb from moms about this. She feels very strongly.
I don't know. So, is there an argument to never let kids play with guns? Absolutely. I have completely caved on that because almost every story that they are, every movie and everything involves guns, and them playing with Nerf guns is a great activity. Well, I don't know if it's a great activity, but it's something they can do with their friends. It doesn't involve screens, and they have a really good time. Yeah. Certainly not. Yeah. So if they never ask for it, great. That's how I feel. And if they do, I don't know. Is the question, do you teach them or do you go and get them a teacher? Is the question what age? I don't quite understand what the question is.
That they show that, at what point should I call it and say, I'm just going to take them somewhere at when they're both at such and such age threshold, and have a licensed professional show them the ropes with rented guns at a range. Obviously, at no point did, hey, let's buy an arsenal or even a gun exit my mouth.
No,
I know where you stand on that, and that's not what I'm talking about. But I think that it's important for, if you lived in Manhattan and all you ever used was a subway, and then you found hear me out.
No.
Hear me out.
Nope.
What do you mean?
Nope.
What do you think I'm going to say?
That it's okay to carry a gun in case of muggers?
Wow, I love how you jump there.
Okay.
Can I finish my thought?
Yes.
And please keep this in the edit, because this is important. This exchange of ours.
Yeah.
Wow. Lack of confidence here. Great. So back to what I was saying. If you lived in Manhattan and all you ever took was the subway, and you ended up needing to drive somewhere, and you don't know how to drive even in the barest sense, then that is a liability at a personal level. If for whatever reason you need to be able to handle a gun, aim it, and fire it without hurting yourself or other people around you who are not targets, then I think that is also a liability.
No, because you never need to fire a gun.
Can I please finish? Like, I understand you feel strongly about this, but like, you asked for my position, and I'm telling you, at no point does that mean that you need to carry one. At no point does that mean that you need to own one. But at some basic level, being able to go to a firing range and pick up a gun and aim it down range and shoot it without hurting yourself or anybody else around you is a skill that I think, people should be able to accomplish. And that takes help and training, and that's okay. It doesn't require gun ownership or anything like that.
When do you need to fire a gun?
Well, that's not the point when you need to fire a gun. Like, if you live in Manhattan, again, to the analogy, and all you ever take is a subway, in your mind, you'll never need to drive a car. But what if something happens where you do need to drive a car? It's not about like this regular occurrence.
I just want to know, like, what is the irregular occurrence where you would need to know how to fire a gun?
Why? Like, does the slight nature of a probability remove the necessity or even the efficacy of just going and learning how to do it? Like, I don't understand what the pushback is. Like,
I feel like you could use this to explain why everybody has to learn how to scuba dive. And I just what is the emergency scuba diving situation, right? Like, can I imagine, like, maybe you're on a boat and it's sinking and there's the only gear is scuba gear? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, I just don't.
No, like, because
if you're in New York City, you may very well want to be in another city. Like, that doesn't take a lot of imagination to like get to the point where you need that skill, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just like trying to imagine the situation where you wouldn't, like, maybe you move to a rural area and it's like all these other things open up, but then you could choose to learn there. I don't see like the situation where you would need to know.
All right. Well, then I think we'll just have to agree to disagree. I mean, I'm already going to be doing all the driving training, and so I'd be bringing them to the firing range on my own anyway, because I'm pretty sure you don't care. But
like I said, I'm not 100% against it, but I don't think it's not like driving. It's not like knowing how to swim. It's not life
How many
skills.
people do you know who live in New York who don't know how to drive a car, who never got a driver's license, who then when they leave the city have absolutely no idea what they're doing and they're starting
No, that's what I'm saying. Those are actual life skills. Right. So there are things we need to do. I don't see this in that category. So like if the boys never have an interest.
Right. But they do have an interest is the point.
They haven't in real guns. I have not heard them bring up real guns.
All right. Well, I have talked to them about this. So
I know, but you have, but I haven't like heard them. Cause like Reader asks us at least twice a week when he's going to Airsoft next.
Right.
There has not been the same, and he reminds us all the time the age we said that he can start having coffee. So like there are definite things on his mind. I haven't heard like firing an actual gun at a gun range in that kind of category.
All right.
But we'll see.
Indeed.
So speaking of like typically masculine pursuits like guns. So last week we talked about the definition of Christian nationalism. And when we were first talking about Christian nationalism, you sent me this super interesting survey you found. And it is by PRRI. Do you know what that stands for?
Did you go to the website?
I'm on the website.
Okay.
What is PRRI?
Are you asking what the acronym stands for?
Yeah.
I don't know. If you're on the website, you know more than I do.
Oh, goodness gracious. All right. Hopefully there's somebody legitimate.
They're slightly left-leaning from what I saw on the all sides.
Got it. Okay. I don't know. It looks like Axios used some of their data, so they can't be totally nonsense. Okay. But they did a survey, and it was about support for Christian nationalism in all 50 states. And it was from 2023. And there's a ton of data. We will link to it. But I thought it was interesting because the one that was the strongest was... So I can't find in PRI. Do you have the statistic they have about Christian nationalists and femininity?
So the study not the study, but the paper that they published in 2023, quote, in the gender and the patriarchy section, I'll give you a couple of cliff notes, and I'm not going to quote them any more than just I'm going to cite the percentages that they list here, and you can go ahead and read the whole thing if you'd like on your own. 1/3 of Americans agree that in a truly Christian family, the husband is the head of the household, wife submits to his leadership. 64% disagree. So that's 1/3 of Americans believe that. Roughly half of Christian nationalism sympathizers and nearly 7 in 10 adherents agree with it. So Christian nationalism off the bat believes that patriarchy is the way to go. Among Christian nationalism sympathizers and adherents who are white, affirmation of hierarchical gender roles is slightly lower at 45% and 65%, which I find interesting. Now, more than 8 in 10 Americans agree, they say 83%, that American society improves when women have more career and educational opportunities, while just 15% disagree. Christian nationalism sympathizers at 23% and adherents 31%. I think those are percentages of the general population, are much more likely to disagree with this statement. On this question, there are only modest differences among white and non-white. About 1/3 of Americans agree that society seems to punish men just for acting like men, and 63% of Americans disagree. However, the rate of agreement increases to a majority among Christian nationalism sympathizers and adherents. So just sympathizers is 54% and adherents is 62%. So not much daylight between the sympathizers and adherents, which is interesting. There are only modest differences among racial lines. Now, around 4 out of 10 Americans, this is 38%, believe that society as a whole has become too soft and feminine, while 59% disagree. At least 6 in 10 Christian nationalism sympathizers and adherents agree with this statement. Here, too, there are only modest differences among white and non-white sympathizers and adherents. So when you go from the we need to be like truly Christian, so that it's interesting how when you broaden it to just society is more feminine, how you get a slightly larger percentage agreeing with that than you do with just like in the truly Christian family, patriarchy is the way to go. So obviously, just at like a general population level, you can have people that think society has become too soft and feminine who disagree that patriarchy is the way to go, specifically the Christian version. It was an interesting study that I thought would be just like good fodder for conversation when it came to us talking about how nationalism, like Christian nationalism, is a boogeyman that we need to really work against.
Well, and I think the thing that also stood out to me and why I was looking for that statistic is that number that thinks that things have become too feminine.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of like the higher percentages when you look through. Like that was where there was some of the most agreement among Christian nationalists. And I just thought that that was really interesting. And it made me think because Dear Old Dads recently had an episode that I'll link to where they talked about Andrew Tate.
Oh, boy.
And they were kind of saying that they didn't feel like there were really people on the other side that were appealing to young boys. Mm-hmm. And that I think where they landed was kind of like there's money to be made in the manosphere space.
Yeah.
So like that's where you get the salesmen.
Yeah.
And since there's like no money to be made on the other side, like we don't get the good salesmen. And that is interesting, but I just wasn't sure if that was right. And then there was this statistic. I do think there are images of more positive masculinity.
Mm-hmm.
But I think maybe people, I don't know if it's that it's not there. I think it might be not what some boys are looking for. So here's my issue. Like, one, we were just watching Fletch with the boys, right? And those movies aren't that old. So it's Chevy Chase. He plays an investigative reporter. And we were watching Fletch Lives, and he like fully just sexually harasses a woman in the office.
Yeah.
And he's the good guy. He's the hero of the film. So in some ways...
Don't get me started on Crocodile Dundee.
Oh, yeah. Different issue there. Equally disgusting. So, and obviously when that happens, we immediately bring it up. But, you know, when you think about how standards have changed just in our lifetime of what is acceptable and what isn't, we have seen a huge switch. So it's not like we haven't, like there has been some acceptance of new thinking on these issues. It's not like the side saying that men should be better has had no efficacy. Like we have seen major shifts. We're clearly seeing like a major backlash right now. But it's not like messages haven't been absorbed across culture. I think like just sort of like base level of what people would think is acceptable has seen like major changes over a period of time. So it's not like nothing has taken. And I also don't think there are sort of no big images of kind of like a different look at men. So like you look at the new Star Trek where Captain Pike is like the chef and the cook, and how he loves to connect with his crew is to have people over and cook for them, you know? And, you know, you have male characters that are like incredibly involved fathers and that. And then, spoiler alert, but it's been out for a while, and I'll put in the notes when you can skip ahead. But like Thunderbolts, the new Marvel movie, right? You have a Marvel movie, a fairly big Marvel movie, where the like big bad is basically like a mental health issue. And the good guys succeed by supporting somebody emotionally. That's like a wild take for a superhero film, right? Mm-hmm. And even if you look at other Marvel characters, like, I feel like media is definitely not just all swinging towards some like hyper regressive, like toxic masculine space. But for a lot of young men, like those aren't the images that they're choosing to identify with. They're choosing to identify with the Andrew Tates. And I just like, I think about women and like queer people. I know Trevel Anderson has a new podcast called The Queer Black Canon. And it's like all of the queer Black characters through time, sort of through media, good and bad, that Black queer people have had to sort of see themselves in, even when the presentations are not perfect or great. There were so few presentations out there that community had to find these characters to feel some sort of sense of representation, right? So we're willing to read themselves into all these spaces. And I feel like women had to do that too, where it's like when there weren't a lot of strong female characters, like we had to go and find the one, like go and dig and find those people that we could look to as role models. And so I'm just wondering if it is that there are like not enough out there, or like that is not where people are choosing to go. And I just didn't know if you had any thoughts.
I think when the first reaction that I had when this is slightly back to the beginning tangential, but the first reaction I had when you brought this up, talking about how the Dear Old Dads pegged the monetization aspect of this, is that Christian apologists do the same thing. They appeal to the fears that people are losing their cultural identity, and through that appeal, they peddle all sorts of stuff, speaking gigs and books and podcasts and subscription things and whatever. And I think that for them to have any sort of pushback, there needs to be something more cohesive. I think part of the issue is that the sorts of people that would potentially put together some sort of cohesive resistance against that, like, brosphere are themselves, like, because they don't have that same sort of like fear-based response, that it might not, because there isn't as much of a visceral reaction from the opposition to folks like Andrew Tate, that there just isn't that impetus, right? There isn't an animus against him, aside from just like commenting against him and doing memes about him and pointing out how, he sex trafficked and all this sort of stuff. But to really stop Andrew Tate now, and more importantly, to stop the next Andrew Tate, whoever that is, I do agree, like, there needs to be something a little bit more cohesive, but I don't know what that would look like. Like, a lot of the pushback comes from people rallying, for example, Pedro Pascal. People rallying around Pedro and his Protect the Dolls t-shirt and all of his fashion stuff and his, like, sly over the shoulder zaddy looks at the paparazzi. Like people who, like, men who are okay with their feminine side and don't view their feminine side as a threat to their masculine side. And the issue, I think, is that there are already so many, like the people who need to have those sorts of examples already have them, because the artistic community, like, broadly gives so many examples, because people who tend to be artistic, I think, they tend to be more in touch with they tend to have, like, looked at themselves more. That's how they produce their art, right? And so because they tend to be more introspective, whether that's good or bad, that they're, I think, more inclined to be able to identify the different parts of their personas and not fear them, not feel like they need to box them up. And feel free to say if I'm off base with this, but I think that since there are already so many positive examples of masculinity in pop culture, there might not be from the people who already are getting that buzz from seeing like, again, the Pedro Pascals of this world, like, be supportive and also strong. That because of that, they're not saying, oh, we also need this new media outlet or this new, charitable organization or this new, like, media voice supporting more well-rounded masculine voices or depictions, because I think we already have those through storytellers and the storytelling. But the people that are afraid of loss won't necessarily respond to something other than a loud voice, like authoritarianism 101. This is an authoritarian mindset.
Yeah.
So they peddle fear and they say, I am the solution to your fear. We are in this together, buy my book. So I don't think that, I think, how about this? Let me back up a step. I think that the two sides they diverge so wildly just on worldview, like one being fear-based of a loss of culture, the other one being fear-based at a very real, possibility or actuality of political and social persecution.
Mm-hmm.
That they, like, how do you fight against, like, a boogeyman that doesn't exist? Like the sort of that Christian nationalism, that victimhood complex, the incel, like all of the incel stuff. It's all sort of wrapped up together in this perceived loss, this perceived victimhood. And on the other side, they're just like, we're just going to pay attention to these people who don't want to hurt us. And I don't know how to square that circle. Like, if the side that already is getting what it needs from the positive depiction standpoint, like, if they don't need something more cohesive, then they're not necessarily going to be motivated to try to give something that would be more cohesive, that would also appeal to those people who are afraid. Like, the best you can do is to try to deprogram the folks like they're in a cult. Cause I mean, we've seen lots of really reasonable explanations as to why that manosphere is very cultish. But I think that deprogramming angle is the best bet, because you can give them positive examples all you want, but there already are positive examples. And the people that respond to the positive examples are already responding to the positive examples. And how do you take a positive example and shoehorn it into a message of fear when that's the message that those people who are so afraid of loss of their Christian culture or masculinity or whatever, when that fear is what they're responding to? Like, you wouldn't say, oh, I see you're afraid. You don't need to be afraid. Mm-hmm. That's not going to get you anywhere, because they're still going to be afraid. They're not going to take you seriously. They're not going to listen to what you have to say. So do you do like a mass, like, stealth multimedia blast of cult deprogramming, like Big Brother type stuff, but in reverse? Like, I don't know. I don't know what it'll take. I think it took a long time to get here. It took decades to get to this point. I think gradually it was built up over generations. If you look at the response of, the crew cut sort of stereotypical, white paternalistic vitriol against counterculture back in the 50s and the 60s, and then through, of course, into the 70s. I think that because you have this sort of multi-layered fear that, Christianity is losing its grip on America, even though it isn't, and that masculinity is dying, even though it clearly isn't. It just is changing. That, like masculine and feminine depictions change, this fear has built up over time. And I don't know if like a quote unquote fix is going to get you anywhere. I think it might just be something that we have to ride out, you know, like I honestly, I don't know how to answer the question. I know that's a long-winded way of saying it, but
I mean, I do like thinking about my own examples. I do think there's something interesting in the fact that what I was talking about, like a lot of the examples I had were kind of mass media.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways, the movement to change how we think about these things has been so successful that you do, you know, like that's a major TV show, like that's a major movie. Even though Joe Rogan makes a boatload of money and has so many listeners.
He's going to church now, just in case you're worried.
Great.
He's going to church, just like Russell Brand is going to church.
Fantastic. You know, it's still a podcast, and like these guys are on YouTube. And I feel like, particularly thinking about young men, I think we've seen a switch where like you see more positive portrayals in like what could be considered legacy media.
Mm-hmm.
And you see more of this manosphere pushback, even though it's like arguably more popular. It's, you know, numbers wise, I don't know how it compares, but like it's still in what is like not the legacy media. So I wonder if there is like a weird switch, particularly for young people, of feeling like, you know, I mean, I think young people like to feel like they're pushing back against the norm.
Yeah.
They like to feel like they have stuff figured out that maybe the adults don't know. And like, I wonder if part of it is that is flipped, where it feels like the people who are counterculture and maybe like pointing out what is wrong is actually the people in the manosphere, even though that stuff is like incredibly popular, kind of because of where it's showing up. It's in the spaces where people who have been smaller and scrappier have been. Like Marvel is obviously from a huge corporation, right? That's not somebody, as much as it's wildly popular, like that's not somebody talking directly to you. Like I think most people know that's like coming from a corporation. And I can feel like it's pretty cool that something coming from a corporation would take such a wild swing, but it doesn't have that, like, I'm a real person going to tell you the real truth, feel that a lot of these manosphere guys have done an incredible job at cultivating. And then I can think about creators that push back against it, but a lot of them, there's like the Speech Prof and another guy I follow who I will link to, but their whole style is much more like cozy dads. And I can see for young men maybe not seeing themselves in that portrayal as much.
Mm-hmm.
I also like, I hate to say it because man, I was so mad at Bernie Sanders when he decided to run against Clinton. But I feel like, you know, the Bernie bros, like he managed to capture young men and turn them against like corporations.
It's the disaffection, like
but then it like all.
But that's always been there, like right. But that's always been there.
Yeah, but I feel like we need that. Like if people are, I think
we're getting it. Have you seen the rallies? Like Obama missed Montana by 2 points in 2008, and the rallies for AOC and Bernie have been absolutely insane. And like Nebraska, like these places that you would not expect to have.
No. That's amazing. But like, is it young men? Oh, that's what I wonder. What I think is interesting about Bernie's first run is he, like, because I would bet serious money that a lot of those Bernie bros voted for Trump the last time around.
Oh, I would not put that past it. I don't know what the stats are, but I can see that for sure. 100%.
But there's so it's amazing that they're doing so well. I haven't seen the stats for like young men, and I'm just curious because I feel like it was like a little snapshot just this like little flick in time where somebody was able to take that disaffection and turn it against something that was like actually real and bad. And I don't know how to do that again. And he's like an old white Jew. Like, it was so weird that happened. But it did. And that to me is the most interesting case study of what could be. And maybe the fact that it's sort of like, well, I don't know if it fell apart. My gut is that like that part of it sort of fell apart. But whatever that moment was, I think is intriguing in the current landscape. Because he did it for a minute. Like, he just took angry guys and he made them like angry at the current political system and corporations.
Yeah, I'm looking at how a recent, very recent, as in like this past week, post-mortem of the 2024 election that talks specifically about Gen Z, is that there's an old Gen Z and a young Gen Z, right? That's a 10-year spread. And that old Gen Z are more progressive. And that young Gen Z, this time around, actually are swung wildly toward Trump.
Yeah.
I think there are a number of reasons why you could say that. You could say COVID anxiety. You could say, the increasing economic wage stagnation, and this sense of inaccessibility that they're willing to believe a huckster who promises them the moon, who tells them that it's not your fault, it's this other person's fault. I think that there's, because of that increased anxiety, I'm not surprised that there's a split. And just like I'm not surprised that Gen Z went, like you said, toward Bernie. So there you go, because old Gen Z is 25 to 29. And that takes you back to the first Trump election. You know what I mean? So this tracks completely. So it's a really interesting, we might want to find that. I'm looking at Vox, but it's also a New York Magazine. Are Gen Z Republicans a blip or a trend? And then 3 takeaways from most authoritative autopsy of the 2024 election yet. But I think if we're looking... So I think
what I'm saying is just make everybody mad about capitalism, and then maybe they'll stop caring about shitting on women.
Dude, the YouTube channel More Perfect Union has, like, for a while now, done sort of reporter in the street interviews at political rallies, like very right-leaning political rallies, just asking questions and pointing out to the interviewees how little daylight there is between what they actually care about and what people on the diametrically opposed side of the political spectrum also care about. That it really is about economics, and that, our mutual economic fears are being weaponized against us for the gain of the people who actually are controlling those levers of power. And it really is like a French Revolution sort of situation where, when we come together and choose to sort of like hold our noses and join hands, then we'll be able to sort of scrub the playing field enough where we can let Congress be more representative of populations and less of lobbies. And I don't know if that, I mean, that's just me being really optimistic and, watching maybe Mr. Smith or Star Trek one episode too many, but nonetheless, I think that there is a path through and out of this, but unfortunately, I think it's going to take more pain to get there, because the people that voted for Trump now have to realize fully to the point where they tip back away from Trump, how much damage they've actually done to themselves. Because the people that vote for Trump for those reasons aren't going to care until it actually affects them. They're not voting, for empathetic reasons necessarily. I would argue that, that vote is indicative of a lack, but that's just me being a jerk. And biased. And I think that what we should do is, again, practice empathy, ask questions. Why did you vote for Trump? What is the issue you think is most pressing? And then, like ask them, to back up, to support their position rather than just parrot what somebody tells them to be afraid of. Because that's the thing, is that when you start to ask people to support their positions, you can get them to realize that their positions are potentially incoherent. And I think rhetorically it works a little bit better, and it's also kinder because you're not berating somebody for doing the thing that you think is immoral. You're asking them to just be skeptical and to not accept what they believed yesterday as being true today.
Yeah.
Wow. I didn't know what to think of this episode when we sat down, but that was wild and woolly.
Should we call it there, or should we do one final super short topic?
Let's do a super short topic.
Okay, we're going to end with a shorter thing than the first, which I knew was gonna happen.
I didn't expect the family topic to get so wide ranging.
It was good though.
It was good. It was good. I love having these conversations with you because it sort of lends credence to our whole podcast model. Anyway, go for it. What's going on?
So Adolescence, if you haven't seen it yet, this is like all spoilers. So just turn it off if you don't want to hear it. But we both had a strong reaction after watching it. So Adolescence, it's a show on Netflix. It's a British show. It is 4 episodes about sort of following what happens when a middle school boy ends up killing his classmate and kind of the aftermath of that. And I just want to say, the cinematography is amazing. Each episode is a single shot that can be real, like show-offy, but I think in this case, it actually works very well for the storytelling, and it's exceptionally well done. The acting is fantastic. Like, everybody is just amazing. As a parent, like, watching his parents deal with the fact that their son has committed this terrible crime is like one of the most heart-wrenching things I've seen in a long time. So no criticisms of any of that quality. What I want to talk about is kind of what I heard about the show, because when I heard people talking about it before I saw it, they said, and I think the director has sort of said, that it is a case study of what happens when like a young man gets pulled into the manosphere. And it's why I really wanted to watch it, because I do think that's super interesting.
But to quote Otto from a Fish Called Wanda, disappointed!
Yeah, so I don't see it. I actually don't know if he was a kid pulled into the manosphere. So what we do know is that he was mad because the girl was bullying him, saying that he was an incel. So that requires like an understanding of what incel is. So it requires like a vague knowledge of the manosphere.
Yeah.
But you don't have to be pulled into the manosphere to know what that means and to be hurt by the insult, right?
Right.
And he says that he's ugly, but I think there are lots of reasons that kids could think they're ugly. That's like sort of
He's only ugly on the inside.
Yeah, and he's very, well, I don't know.
It's cartoonish.
And he's exceptionally angry, but he's angry in a scene after he's been arrested. And I'm like, I don't know if he was angry before, like as a middle school, like barely a teenager, as a middle school kid, realizing that the rest of your life might be behind bars. I have no, like, is that fair? He killed somebody. I'm not talking about like whether he deserves it or not. I'm just talking about like psychologically, as a child still, for sure, realizing that you have done something that is going to profoundly impact the rest of your life. To me, that's enough to just make you completely lose it. So I had no idea how much of that episode where he's talking to a shrink is just him in a state of like who knows what because his entire life is exploding before him, or a reaction to something else. And then in the final episode, you find out that he was on his computer a lot and his parents weren't doing anything about it. But is that an exploration of somebody pulled into the manosphere? I don't know.
What they're missing in that show was a fictional manosphere talking head. Somebody who isn't a real person, so you don't get sued to oblivion, but also one that they can use as a counterpoint of nuance, like to actually make a conversation, because right now it's just like a one-sided conversation. You just have the aftermath of this kid consuming some media somewhere, having some reaction and committing a crime, right?
Yeah.
A crime of passion that he thinks like is justified because of what he's consumed, but not knowing specifically what he's consumed. All we have is the output. I want to see the equation. And the equation is the conversation, and that's why it's boring, because there is no conversation.
And I don't feel like there was like so many dog whistles in that space, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't feel like he says any of them to even know like which aspect of it was speaking to him. He didn't like being called an incel, but I also don't feel like he was in the incel space. Like, was he like an Andrew Tate guy? Was he an incel guy? Was he they're like not the same.
Example,
they're all in the manosphere, but they're not the same vibe at all.
But like him calling himself ugly, for instance, like a way that you could do this better. He says, I'm ugly. Okay. Are you really? He's a cute kid. He doesn't have to think of himself that way, but he does. And that's in comparison, right? That's the whole thing with how the danger of Instagram and influencer, these lifestyle bloggers, whatever, like they give you this curated version of themselves and their lives to make you feel jealous or less than, to buy their product to get you closer to their aesthetic, right?
Yeah.
So what you're missing is, again, that fictional influencer or mouthpiece. And then all you need to do is see like their Instagram page where they're all like chiseled and whatever, and then just see him looking at the pictures and then saying, oh, I am like, the kid is comparing himself to this image you now have. You understand it. And that is something that every parent whose kid is on social media should be afraid of, because that is a recipe for like ego disaster. Like your kid shouldn't be comparing themselves to these like fake versions of people that they see on the internet that are sold and packaged, right? So yeah, it's one-sided. We needed to see where it was coming from, and we just didn't get it.
But I think it's a great idea. So if somebody like that did so well, if somebody really wants to do a psychological breakdown of what it means for a young person to go through that, like I am so there to watch it. Also, if we are just not British enough to get it, let us know. I almost reached out to Alastair and being like, did we not see it? Are we just not in the UK? Is that what happened?
This might be how I didn't get the appeal of Hamilton.
What?
Because I am totally disconnected from the immigrant experience, and Hamilton is so much about, the immigrant experience and expectations that people have, and like social mobility and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, I just I didn't get it. And I think because of that, I just didn't get it. And so it might be the same thing with Adolescence. Like I'm skeptical enough to accept that, my perception of this could be skewed. But just like as a consumer of media, from a basic storytelling standpoint, I wanted to see why. I didn't just want to assume, oh, he's a teenager and Andrew Tate was spoken in a line of dialogue, so I'm supposed to now assume that that like his violence is somehow justified by the manosphere. There needed to be more there. There just wasn't enough meat on the bone for me.
I mean, to our last topic, I think it's just like, it is so important. So I think the more we can really think about it and try to dissect it, I'm open to all the people who are willing to try to delve into it. But I just wish there was more there to really understand. Because also, like in Great Britain, like I think I could be wrong, but I feel like there's been some like very Andrew Tate-ish type stuff happening in the schools over there that people have had to push back against. So I don't know. I just,
I think the best part about watching the show has been our conversations about it and all the ways that we found it deficient. Because that's like that as a parent, that's what you should be doing. You see a depiction of, a child, perpetrating a crime like that. And your reaction should be, right? Like, how accurate is this to reality? Are these influences actually influences my children will be subjected to? All that sort of stuff. So the conversation that we've had surrounding this has been very, very fruitful and valuable.
Yeah. I mean, I've already talked with the boys several times about like chads and why that's a really toxic thing to think about. And
yeah, the boys talking about Giga Chads as a meme is just hilarious because they're still so young.
It's real weird out there. All right, we should call it.
Yes.
As always, we have to thank Jonathan Zalbin and First Frame Music for the music for this podcast.
And here wraps up this episode of The Family Skeptical, where nothing is sacred except for our kids.
I know the other stuff we're talking about, but not the family story.
But not the family story.
Ooh,
I have an idea.
Okay.
I have an idea. Right to it.